Hey, welcome to Mooney Reads. My name is Beck, and today I'm going to be doing A through Z of Queer Lit. I'll try to find the original to link below. If I can't find the original, I'll at the very least put some renditions of this from other queer YouTubers that I've really enjoyed. The whole point of this is to go through the whole alphabet and find a book that has each of the letters in it somewhere, either in the title or in the author's name. I tried really hard to use the first letter in one of the words of the title or in the author's first or last name, but it didn't always work out, especially for some of the less common letters, but I'll go ahead and get started. A is for Alex Gino, who wrote George, which is a young reader's book that focuses on a trans girl who is in, I think, late elementary school. But we get to go through her kind of figuring herself out a little bit and coming out. It's a super sweet book. I really adored it. Alex Gino recently came out with another book, or it's about to come out, Rick, which centers an asexual character. I haven't read it yet, but I'm really looking forward to it. B is for Butterflies, as in The Lord of the Butterflies by Andrea Gibson. If you've been watching this channel for any length of time, you will know how much I absolutely adore Andrea Gibson. In their poetry, they talk about their queerness as well as their experience with chronic illness and mental health. They also talk about a number of different social issues within their books. I honestly cannot say enough good things about them. C is for C.N. Lester, who wrote Trans Like Me, which is part memoir, part journalist exploration, part gender studies. It's really wonderful and very useful. I actually use this in my women's and gender studies classroom. One of the important things about this is that it is own voices, so it's a book on transness by somebody who is non-binary trans. D is for Dream, as in the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. This book absolutely blew me away. This is the best book that I've read all year. It is a memoir that's written mostly in second person, and it is about her experience being in a abusive relationship as a queer woman with another woman. It's really hard to put into words the experience of reading this book. She incorporates so much that's literary and poetic in parts of it. You really get the emotions that she was feeling. Alongside the majority second person narrative, you also get pieces that are in first person that are more essay form, where she talks about other sapphic women who have tried to go to court for domestic violence cases and how they've been treated. E is for Eric Marcus, who wrote Making History. And again, if you've been on here for any length of time following me, you'll probably have heard me talk about Making History and Eric Marcus's wonderful work as an oral historian. This is basically a compilation of interviews that he did with people who were activists between 1945 and 1990. F is for Fun Home by Alison Bechdel. This is a memoir written in comic format, and it outlines Alison Bechdel's experience with her father. She discusses growing up with him and then him passing away, and only after he dies does she realize that he was gay or bisexual. The way that she incorporates kind of narrative around the comics works really well for this story. G is for Grimsley, as in Jim Grimsley, who wrote Dream Boy, which is a novel that looks at this main character's experience with love, but it is a very dark story. I'm honestly not 100% sure if I like it or not. I remember being very unsettled. There's a lot of death imagery in this, and the ending is really kind of bizarre. But I wanted to mention it because it is an LGBT novel and it's won a number of awards, and I don't really see it talked about all that much. It was written in the mid-90s, and I actually do want to reread it once I look a little bit more into some of the history stuff that I have, particularly the stuff that focuses on the AIDS epidemic and the one book that I have on gay men, because I feel like going in a little bit more consciously and expecting the death imagery and things like that, I think that I'll maybe get a little bit more out of it. H is for Hardell, as in Ash Hardell, who wrote the ABCs of LGBT. This is basically the handbook for LGBT identities. It has definitions for a ton of different sexuality and gender identities. It talks about the difference between romantic and sexual attraction. And my favorite thing about this book is probably the chapter on spectrums and how you can kind of conceptualize your identities in different ways just depending on what helps you the most. This is a fantastic book. One of the main premises of it is, you know, you have all of these different definitions and things like that, but the point of all of this isn't to have a box to shove yourself in. These labels are tools that you can use for yourself for as long as they're helpful for you. If you haven't seen anything about Ash Hardell, definitely check out their YouTube channel. They haven't posted a whole lot recently, but a lot of their ABCs of LGBT videos or other videos on LGBT topics are wonderful, and the videos that they have with their partner are honestly the cutest thing I've ever seen in my life. They both have my whole heart. So I highly recommend this if you want to know more about the LGBT community, if you are an ally, or if you want to do some discovery for yourself, or if you know who you are and you just want to understand some of the terms that people use. This would definitely be a good book for that. Now, if you do go looking for the book, it is under their dead name, so both the first and the last name are a little bit different. I is for Imogen Binney, who wrote Nevada, which is a novel about a trans woman who is in her 30s and kind of realizing that she doesn't really know herself all that well. Her relationship is sort of falling apart, and she's kind of having to go through another level of self-discovery. I really enjoyed this book. It's not for everybody. The narrative style is a little bit different. She doesn't really use quotations, so that kind of breaks down that barrier between narrative and speech, but I think that is very intentional, and that's one of the things I enjoyed about this book. This is also very character-driven. There is a plot within this, but it's fairly minimal. I really love this book. Next, we have Jay, which is for Jackson Bird, who wrote Sorted, which is his memoir about figuring himself out and coming out as a trans man. I absolutely love this memoir. I cannot say enough good stuff about it. The actual things that he has to say about his story are really wonderful, and then throughout it, it's peppered with different informational pieces, so little boxes with the sides that tell you a little bit more just about that specific thing relating to trans identity. So it's really, really wonderful if you want to know more about trans people, because this is not just a memoir, but it's also an educational tool. Even if you're pretty familiar with who trans people are or what that means, his story is still really wonderful. K is for Kabi, as in Nagata Kabi, who wrote My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness. This is a manga that goes through kind of the author's experience figuring out that she's lesbian, and also really dealing with her mental health. This book really spoke to me in a lot of ways, the way that she described kind of her mental health problems and how being closeted exacerbated those in a number of different ways, and particularly how she talked about kind of dissociation and trying to fit in with what people expected of her. And in general, it's just a really interesting memoir. Nagata Kabi also wrote My Solo Exchange Diaries, volumes 1 and 2, which kind of go along with My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness. L is for Love is Love, which is a compilation of short comics from multiple people. This was put together to raise money for the survivors of the Pulse shooting, which happened in 2016. Overall, I really did enjoy this comic compilation. Some of the comics were better than others. My main issue with some of them is that it seemed pretty clear that some of them were written by straight people. Not that it's bad that straight people would be involved in this, because I do think that it's very good, and a good form of allyship. However, the reason that I say that it's kind of clear that a straight person wrote it is because some of them felt a little bit disjointed from what queer experience has been, especially the ones that looked a little bit historically. There was this idea that it was really good and then now it's bad, but like it just didn't really seem to have a sense of where the movement actually was. It was a little bit unrealistic. However, some of the other comics absolutely had me bawling my eyes out because they were so beautiful. So I definitely recommend getting this if you can. Next we have M, which is for Mero, as in Julie Mero, who wrote Blue is the Warmest Color. Blue is the Warmest Color basically focuses around this relationship between these two women. It focuses a little bit more on Clementine, who throughout the beginning of the book, it also looks at her figuring out her sexuality, questioning her sexuality. I really loved this. I absolutely adored the majority of the story. The ending was a little bit rushed, but overall it was really wonderful. Now there is a movie of this, but I do not recommend watching that. The director is creepy, and the women who were involved as the main characters felt very uncomfortable. So I definitely recommend you only check out the book. The movie kind of misses the whole point of it anyways. I think that the movie has kind of a biphobic message, whereas the book, I think, is looking more at compulsory heterosexuality. But I won't get into all of that because the video would be very long. So we will move on to the letter N, which is for name, as in A Year Without a Name by Cyrus Grace Dunham. I have definitely talked about this book a few other times, but it is just a really wonderful memoir that looks at Cyrus Dunham's experience really figuring out their gender and what exactly their gender means for them in terms of all these other places in their life. It kind of goes back and forth throughout their life a little bit in a really neat way. I really enjoyed the literary style that they have, and in general there were a lot of pieces of this that really resonated with me personally. O is for Ostertag, as in Molly Ostertag, who wrote The Witch Boy. The Witch Boy is the first in a middle grade graphic novel series that focuses on this boy who is a part of a witch family. Now, in this story, there are people who are magical and people who are non-magical. And within the magical families, the boys are shapeshifters and the girls are witches. Aster has to figure out how to talk to their family about how they want to be a witch and kind of convince them to let him go into that. Alongside that, some troubling things end up happening to other parts of his family. There are some of the boys who end up going missing. This is an absolutely wonderful book. This is an absolutely wonderful trilogy. If it wasn't clear, this is definitely an allegory for kind of transness and the trans experience. But alongside that, there is actual representation for LGBT people. Aster's best friend Charlie has two dads. And in the last book, Midwinter Witch, there's actually a little bit of romance implied between two women. Overall, this is just a really beautiful series. The next letter is P, which stands for persistence, as in Just One of the Guys, Transgender Men and the Persistence of Gender Inequality by Kristen Schultz. This is a book that outlines a sociological study that Kristen Schultz did with a number of transgender men. The majority of this book focuses on the workplace and how trans men's experience as they transition shifts in the workplace. I had to read this for a class, but I really enjoyed it. I think that it gives a lot of perspective on gender inequality in general and the experiences of trans people. Q stands for Queen, as in Road Queen, which is an adorable standalone manga. The main character is a lesbian motorcycle racer. This includes a fake dating trope. Throughout the course of the story, you actually find out that the kind of fuckboy badass actually has a soft and squishy side. It is absolutely adorable, and I highly recommend it if you're looking for some romantic, squishy gay trash. I say trash in the most loving way possible. I adore this book and highly, highly recommend it. R stands for Redefining Realness by Janet Mock. This is Janet Mock's first memoir, and it kind of looks at her childhood and what it was like to be a queer kid and then come out in Hawaii. I really enjoyed reading this, even though it's been a while. Janet Mock has actually come out with a second memoir, which is Surpassing Certainty, that I'm looking forward to reading. S is for Smith, as in Nikki Smith, who wrote The Deep and Dark Blue. This is a fantasy middle grade that focuses on the set of twins. In the beginning of the story, there is some political unrest, and these two heirs to the nobility have to go into hiding. So you get this whole fantasy plot alongside this trans coming out narrative. T is for Tamaki, as in Mariko Tamaki, who wrote Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me alongside Rosemary Valero O'Connell. Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me is a young adult graphic novel that looks at the ways that toxic relationships can impact people and can impact friendships. I think the overall message in this book is definitely something that really all teens and young adults, really a lot of just plain old adults, need to hear, especially in the context of a queer relationship. There's this kind of assumption that queer relationships will be good or positive or better, but ultimately queer relationships are still relationships between two humans and can go any kind of direction. But this is such an important book. If I had had this as a teenager, I feel like I would have done different things. Even if I'd had it as like a 20-year-old or a 25-year-old, I would have made totally different decisions if I had actually taken the point of this book to heart. Next we have the letter U, which is the last letter in the word you, as in I Wish You All the Best by Mason Deaver. This is a young adult book that focuses on Ben, who is a non-binary main character, and in the beginning of the book they come out to their family and end up getting kicked out of their house and have to move in with their sister. Throughout the book they're kind of coming to terms with themselves and trying to figure out how to be comfortable enough to really try to come out again. This is such a beautiful book. I'm not sure that I have felt as seen as a non-binary person in a book as I have when I read this. V is for Vaid, as in Alok Vaid Menon, who is a wonderful non-binary poet who came out with Femme in Public a while back. Their poetry hits on a lot of things regarding gender and sexuality as well as race. They also hit on some themes regarding mental health. They talk about their personal experience as well as kind of what they see societally going on. I absolutely adore Alok's poetry. I also adore Alok's other work. They do a whole lot with fashion. They also have a new book that they're going to be coming out with. You can go ahead and pre-order it. It's Beyond the Gender Binary. Next, we have W, which is for Will Grayson, which is by John Green and David Levithan. Will Grayson focuses on two different boys, both with the name Will Grayson, and how their lives end up meeting incidentally. It's been a while since I've read this book, but I really, really enjoyed it. The way that this book was written, as I understand it, John Green focused on one of the Will Graysons, and David Levithan focused on the other one. David Levithan focused on the one who is gay, and kind of throughout the story they had to figure out how to come to terms with that and come out. They kind of talk about depression and with that as well. So in that regards, this is an Own Voices book. John Green is not LGBT, but David Levithan is a gay man, and he's the one that works on writing that gay character. Next, we have X, as in the last letter in the word fox, as in Dara Hoffman Fox, who wrote You and Your Gender Identity, A Guide to Discovery. This is a super wonderful workbook that talks about gender and gender exploration. On top of this, it also hits on other things that aren't necessarily tied to gender, but are important when you're figuring out any sort of thing about yourself. It helps you identify and try to get through different fears. It also focuses a whole lot on self-care. But on top of all of that, it also has you go through really reflecting in different specific ways about your gender. I went through this kind of starting towards the end of last year. I want to say around October I started to really go through this book. And at this point I knew that I was non-binary, but this really helped validate that, and it made me feel a lot more secure in who I am. So I highly recommend it for anyone who is questioning or anyone who is trans or non-binary. Really, even if you're not any of those things, I think that it can be helpful to kind of go through this and really critically reflect on yourself and learn a lot of the tools that they talk about throughout this. Y is for Yuki Kamatani, who wrote Our Dreams at Dusk. Our Dreams at Dusk is a manga series that focuses on a number of different characters who all go through this LGBT drop-in center. Each book focuses on a different character's experience. This first book focuses on this gay character who's sort of outed. The second book looks at a trans girl's experience. I have yet to read the third and fourth book, but I've really enjoyed the first two. Finally, we have Z, which was the hardest one to find something for. Z stands for Ziemke, as in Deborah Ziemke, who was the designer for The Quilt, Stories from the Name Project, which is written by Cindy Ruskin. The pictures within are taken by Matt Herron. So this focuses on the creation and contents of the AIDS quilt. For those who don't know, the Names Project started in 1987. Cleve Jones kind of came up with the idea of making a quilt with all of the people's names who have died from AIDS in order to get attention drawn to the AIDS epidemic that the government was fervently ignoring. So with this project, they put together this huge quilt. I'm pretty sure this is from the first time that it was displayed. Each of these panels is 6 by 3, so they're each supposed to represent a grave, and each of them have the name as well as usually some information or some pictures from the person who passed away. This is an incredibly important project and a really important piece of history that's really often overlooked. In the United States, we're not really taught about the AIDS epidemic unless you somehow have really great queer-friendly education that I did not get in Tennessee. You don't really get to hear a whole lot about it. And I personally have been trying to learn more about it. It was a lot of what people had to focus on throughout the 80s and part of the 90s because while there were other issues that did kind of get focused on, you couldn't not focus on the fact that tens of thousands of people were dying. And alongside these people dying, the government wasn't really paying that much attention to it. Not a whole lot of money was given initially to finding a cure or anything like that. People actually had to make their own educational pamphlets. First, people within certain cities were posting pictures of their own symptoms in order to tell people to watch out for these different things. And while all of this was going on, there was also legislation in the works to try to keep people with HIV and AIDS or people suspected to have HIV and AIDS away from the public altogether. So it was a really horrifying time, and a lot of people died because of that government neglect. And a lot of these people, as they were dying, were fighting for the government to acknowledge them so that other people wouldn't have to go in the same way that they did. So not to end this on a downer, but pay attention to all of gay history, especially the pieces of gay history that are neglected and ignored. So that was my A through Z of LGBT Lit. This went through a lot of different genres, and this is far from all of the LGBT books that I have read or own or want you to read. I'll probably end up doing this again sometime because this was a lot of fun to try to plan out, and there are a lot of books that people should be reading. If you've read any of the books that I've mentioned, definitely comment and let me know what you thought. As always, thank you so much for watching. Bye.